487 ships vanished before Travancore finished the word advance. The overlay showed zero return fire, no missile trails, no beam scatter. Just numbers on his display counting down to nothing, one hull mark at a time, faster than his tactical officer could log the names of the dead. Core had commanded fleets for 190 years. He had never watched an enemy win without firing a shot. The wrong part wasn't the dying. War killed ships. The wrong part was the silence around it. No alarms from the enemy vessel, no triumphant broadcast, no gloating. Just a single black hull drifting in the wreckage of his vanguard, running no lights at all, like it hadn't noticed it had won. Core's hand tightened on the arm of his command chair. Bronze scales caught the red battle light. "Reroute the main fleet," he said. His voice didn't shake. It never had. "We advance in full." Nobody on the bridge answered right away. That silence was the second wrong thing. Empires fall slow, then all at once. This one was about to find out how fast. 6 hours earlier, on the war spire of a system the Drakvani Dominion had renamed and rebuilt 47 times over, High Marshal Travancore walked a hall that smelled of ozone and old iron. Tactical Officer Vess matched his stride, tablet in hand, voice clipped and certain. 3 unaligned systems remain in the expansion corridor, Marshal. 2 are empty rock. The third has a species designation. A pause, the kind Vess used when a fact bored him. Human, soul system, primitive. By every metric we've logged, Vess didn't look up. No fleet presence beyond the system's own border. No signals in 600 years suggesting weapons research past chemical propulsion. They stopped broadcasting entirely a few centuries back. Went quiet and stayed quiet. Then they're dead, or they're hiding, or they simply learned we were listening, Vess said, and allowed himself something close to a smile. 6 centuries of silence, to him, was proof of nothing but weakness. An empire that had swallowed 47 worlds didn't waste time imagining a 48th might be different. They passed the War Council chamber, where junior officers were already drafting the occupation charter for Seoul, resource tables, labor projections, the paperwork of conquest finished before the conquest itself. Core paused at the doorway long enough to watch a young cartographer sketch borders around a system she had never seen, humming while she worked, and felt nothing at all. That was how it always went. The taking came easy. The counting came after. In the shadowed alcove at the hall's end, an old voice interrupted before he reached the doors. "You should not go to Seoul." Elder Relian sat where he always sat, withered and folded into robes older than the war spire itself. A Relian, a species that remembered things the Empire preferred forgotten. 1900 years old by the estimates anyone bothered to make. The Dominion kept him the way old empires keep old things, because removing him would have cost more than ignoring him. It stays silent because it is listening. They stopped broadcasting because they had nothing left to say, or because they had already said everything they needed to say to themselves and had no interest in an audience. Relian's hand, thin as old paper. "You've said that for 40 years, Elder. I have been right for 40 years. Relian's eyes, milk pale, didn't track movement anymore, but they still found people. A species does not stay silent for 6 centuries because it is weak, closed around the arm of his chair. You mistake silence for surrender, Marshal. I have watched you make that mistake 46 times before. It has been correct 46 times. I'm asking you to consider that pattern's end." Core didn't answer. He didn't need to. Certainty didn't require rebuttal. It was the whole reason he'd never lost. He left the old man in the alcove and didn't look back, and if he had, he might have noticed that Relian wasn't watching the door he'd left through. He was watching a star chart on the far wall, one finger tracing the space around a small yellow sun, the way a man traces a wound he already knows won't heal clean. 90 light-years away, aboard the UES Vanguard, Captain Elias Rourke stood at the forward viewport with a brass compass in his palm. Gray at the temples, a face like granite left out too many winters, he turned the compass over once, twice, thumb finding the words etched into its face without needing to look. Home 4.2 Lelai. His father had carried it across a continent before ever handing it down, a man who'd never once left Earth and never wanted to. Threshold status, Rourke said. His weapons officer, a woman named Priya Solanki with a voice like she'd rehearsed calm for a decade, answered without turning from her console. 8,000 platforms, all green. The Grey Reach is armed, sir, has been for 300 years. 300 years. Long enough that most of the crew who'd built it were dead, and the platforms out there disguised as ice, as drifting rock, as nothing worth a second scan, had simply waited. That was the whole design, not a wall, a trap that looked like an empty room. My grandmother worked the original platform survey, Solanki said, not looking up. Said the whole project only made sense if you assumed somebody was eventually going to try us. Otherwise, it was just an expensive way to freeze a lot of very patient hardware. She sounds like she understood the assignment. She used to say the same thing every winter. We're not hiding. We're just not finished waiting yet. Solanki's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Didn't think I'd be the one who found out if she was right. They'll come through the outer marker first, Rourke said. Small formation, testing us. And if they don't test, if they send everything at once, Rourke closed his hand around the compass. Then we still hold the line. He didn't say it like a boast. He said it like a man checking a lock he'd already checked twice. The Drakvani Vanguard crossed into the Grey Reach 40 ships strong, running standard subjugation formation, wide, confident, unhurried. Their commander, a mid-ranked officer named Tesk, who had personally overseen the fall of 2 systems and kept a small carved token from each world folded in his coat pocket, broadcast the message his species had used for 6,800 years. You are now the property of the Drakvani Dominion. Stand aside. You have 5 of your minutes. The Vanguard didn't answer. Tesk waited. Silence from a target usually meant surrender in progress or fear too complete for words. He gave the order for a show of force, 200 missiles, enough to crack open a moon, aimed just wide of the black ship's hull. They detonated 30 kilometers out, light bloomed and faded. When the sensors cleared, the Vanguard sat exactly where it had been, untouched, unmoved. Some kind of active defense, Tesk's second reported, frowning at a display that made no sense. No damage, no shield flare. It's like the ship wasn't even. He didn't finish the sentence. Rourke's voice came through clean, almost gentle. Activate the threshold protocol. 300 years of silence woke up at once. The first platform triggered somewhere in the ice field to the Vanguard's flank, and space didn't explode so much as fold. A seam pulling closed around 18 ships before their pilots had time to register the gravity reading spiking. Tesk's own screen went white, then simply went dark, the carved token in his coat pocket still there, still unclaimed, when the debris settled. 22 ships scattered. 7 more didn't make the turn in time. 15 limped for open space, engines screaming, and found the corridor they'd come through already sealing behind them like a door no one remembered opening. On the bridge of the Annihilator, closing fast on the Grey Reach, Dravan Kor received the report in fragments. Vanguard status unknown. Vanguard status critical. Vanguard status gone, and felt something he hadn't felt in 190 years of unbroken conquest. He felt the numbers stop making sense. Kor didn't order a retreat. Retreat wasn't a word his fleet carried in its vocabulary, not after 6,800 years of never needing it. Full advance, he said again. Louder this time, as if volume could unmake what the sensors were telling him. The Vanguard hit a minefield. Nothing more. We have the numbers to walk through a minefield. Vess, beside him, said nothing. That was new. Vess always had something. Say it, Kor told him. There's no minefield signature, Marshal. Vess's voice had lost its clip. Mines don't fold space. Mines don't make a fleet disappear without leaving debris that reads as debris. Whatever that was, it wasn't scattered on the ground waiting for us to walk into it. Then what was it? I don't know yet. Vess set down the tablet, and for the first time in the years Kor had known him, his hands weren't quite steady. It was built for a fleet this size, walking in exactly this confident. The Annihilator crossed the outer marker 3 hours later. But I know it was built for exactly this. The full weight of the Dominion's 6th Expeditionary Fleet spread behind it in formation wide enough to blot out the system's own sun from certain angles. 2,000 ships and more, the accumulated weight of 6,800 years of taking, closing on a system that had thrown away 40 of them like a man swatting flies. They found one ship waiting. Black hull, no running lights. Sitting motionless in the drifting wreckage of the Vanguard it had just erased, patient as a held breath. Kor had seen fear before. He had built an empire on causing it. He had never once felt it directed at himself, and he didn't recognize the tightness behind his own ribs as exactly that. Not right away, he mistook it, briefly, for anger, because anger was a feeling he knew how to use. The single ship broadcast on an open channel, and its voice when it came was almost gentle. Drakvani fleet, you have crossed into restricted space. This is your only warning. Turn back or be destroyed. Somewhere on the bridge, someone laughed. It wasn't Kor. He didn't laugh at things that had already cost him 40 ships and given him nothing in return to laugh about. But the laugh spread anyway, nervous and then bolder, because the alternative to laughing was believing that one ship meant what it said, and nobody on that bridge had ever needed to believe a thing like that before. It didn't answer the way the Vanguard had died, not a scattered handful of platforms in one stretch of ice, but the whole gray reach at once, every disguised rock and drifting shard of debris that had sat still for 300 years finally moving. "Advance," Kor said. And this time his voice didn't waver, because certainty was the only weapon he had left that hadn't already failed him once today. The order reached every ship in the fleet at once. The system answered. And the space around the fleet didn't collapse so much as close, the way a hand closes, slow enough to see coming and too fast to escape. Aboard the Vanguard, Rourke watched the display fill with red. "Networks engaged," Solanke said. Her voice had gone flat and clean. All rehearsal, no feeling allowed through. It's not a wall this time, it's expanding around the whole formation. Casualties. Climbing every second we're talking about it, Rourke didn't ask for the number. He'd built this system on the promise that he'd never need to watch it happen in real time, that 300 years of patience would end in a single silent motion, not a scoreboard. "We don't fire a single shot, we don't have to. They're not going to stop advancing, sir. They don't need to stop." Rourke's eyes stayed on the black wreckage field beyond the viewport. He kept his hand on the compass instead, thumb over the letters he couldn't read in the dark but didn't need to. "Hold position," he said, on the single point of light that was the Annihilator still boring forward through a trap it hadn't yet understood it was fully inside. The network isn't waiting on them to stop. It's waiting on them to keep going. 90 light-years distant, in a quarters that hadn't changed its furniture in longer than most species keep records, Elder Relian sat very still in front of a screen that wasn't showing him anything yet. He had asked for the feed the moment the Vanguard reports came back, garbled. Nobody had denied him. Nobody in the Dominion ever quite dared deny the oldest thing in the room, even when they stopped listening to what it said. He didn't watch the tactical overlay. He watched a single line at the bottom of the display, the one counting Drakvani ships still logging active transponders, and he watched it drop the way water drops from a cracked cup, not all at once, but steadily, with no sign of slowing. "You should not have gone to Sol," he said to the empty room, to no one. The way he'd said it 40 times before to someone who could still hear him. This time, nobody was there to argue. Back on the Annihilator's bridge, Vess's console lit with a shape he didn't have a name for yet. Not weapons fire, not a mine, not anything the Dominion's threat catalog had a file for. He stared at it a half-second too long. "Marshal." His voice cracked on the single word. "It's not stopping at the Vanguard's numbers. It's not stopping at any number. The whole system is the weapon. We didn't walk into a minefield." He looked up, and for the first time in 190 years of watching Dravon Kor win, Vess looked at him like a man watching a building he trusted start to lean. "We walked into the whole ocean." Kor said nothing. Somewhere behind him, a junior officer whispered a number under her breath, the kind of number that used to belong to conquered worlds, and now belonged to his own fleet. And for the first time since the Warspire, since the alcove, since the old man who'd told him Pattern's End, there was nothing certain left to say, and he had built his entire career on never speaking, without certainty behind it. Dravon Kor understood that he had walked 6,800 years of unbroken victory into a single system, built by a species that had done nothing but wait. The Grey Reach did not care how certain he was, it only cared that he had crossed the line. The first ship to break formation wasn't fleeing, it was trying to surrender. Rourke saw it on the display before Solanke called it out, a single Drakvani cruiser breaking from the trapped mass, engines cutting, running lights flashing in a pattern no human protocol recognized, but every instinct in the room understood anyway. "Stop, don't fire, we're done. They're offering terms," Solanke said, disbelief threading through the flat calm she'd held all day. "Marshal Kor's not authorizing it. That's a captain acting alone. Let them try," Rourke said. "Hold all platforms on standby. Nobody fires on a ship that's already stopped." It was the first order all day that sounded like mercy instead of math. Kor watched the same surrender attempt from the Annihilator's bridge and felt something close to relief curdle immediately into fury. 6,800 years, and the first crack in his fleet's discipline wasn't fear of the enemy, it was doubt in him. "Recall that ship," he said. "Vess didn't move fast enough." Vess, for the first time since Kor had known him, hesitated on a direct order, and in that hesitation Kor saw the whole future of his command laid bare, a fleet that had stopped believing the math worked, no matter what he ordered it to believe. Marshal, Vess's voice had gone quiet, no longer clipped, no longer certain, just tired in a way that made him sound older than his years. I've run the projections 11 times. There is no formation, no maneuver, no order I can give that gets more than a third of this fleet out of the reach. The math doesn't forgive discipline. It doesn't care how loud you say the order. Then we go through the center, full burn. Overwhelm whatever's controlling the network before it can close completely. Sir, that is an order, Vess. Vess related, his hands, Kor noticed, had stopped shaking. They'd simply gone still, the particular stillness of a man who has already accepted an outcome and is only waiting to see how it arrives. The fleet surged forward, and the Grey Reach answered by doing something it hadn't done yet. It didn't close further. It didn't need to. Instead, for the first time since the battle began, one of the drifting platforms, dormant, silent, indistinguishable from the wreckage around it for 300 years, spoke, not to the Drakvani fleet, to the vanguard. Rourke. The voice was old, digitized, recorded decades before anyone currently on the bridge had been born, but the cadence was unmistakably human, unmistakably tired in the specific way of someone who'd spent a career waiting for a day they hoped would never come. This is Platform Command 17. Network integrity at full capacity. If they push through the center, the collapse doesn't stay contained to the reach. It bleeds inward, toward the inner markers, toward Earth. Solanki's head snapped up. That's not in the manual. It's not supposed to happen, Rourke said, and for the first time all day, his voice carried something other than patience. The network was built to hold a line, not to survive being pushed past it. Somewhere behind the two of them, a junior technician who'd said nothing all day, a woman named Reyes, 26 years old, who'd trained on these systems for 6 years without ever expecting to use them, finally spoke. Sir, if I reroute output through the secondary lattice, I can hold the center without letting it bleed. But it means the reach stops being a cage. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. It becomes a wall, a permanent one. Nothing gets through it again. Not them, not us. We didn't build this to almost hold. 90 light-years away, Elder Relian watched the feed shift. Not ever. Rourke looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and set the compass on the console beside her hand, face up, the etched words catching the low bridge light. Home 4.2 lair. Do it, he said. Watch the tactical overlay change shape as something in the human network reorganized itself into a configuration his species had a very old word for, one that hadn't been used in translation for 3,000 years, because no empire had needed it since. It meant, roughly, the door that closes and does not remember being a door. He said nothing this time. There was nothing left to warn anyone about. The warning had already been given 40 times and ignored 40 times, and now it was simply happening. The way weather happens to people who didn't check the sky. Aboard the Annihilator, the fleet hit what should have been an opening and found a wall instead. Kor watched 200 more ships go the way the Vanguard had gone, in the time it took him to draw one more breath, and understood, with the specific, not a gate slamming shut, something colder, more final. Ships at the leading edge of the formation simply ceasing to register on any sensor at all, the way a held breath simply stops rather than exhaling. Total clarity of a man who has never once needed to imagine failure and is now living inside it, that there would be no version of this day where he walked away having won. Marshal, Vess's voice when it came wasn't afraid anymore. It had passed through fear into something quieter. The center sealed. We're not getting through. We're not getting out. Kor didn't answer right away. He thought of Relian in the alcove of the star chart, of 40 years of a warning he'd filed under senile, because filing it any other way would have meant admitting the Empire's whole momentum could be wrong. He thought of the occupation charter still being drafted somewhere behind him, borders sketched around a system nobody would ever administer now. Open a channel, he said finally. To the human ship, it was the first order he'd given all day that wasn't certain of anything. The channel opened, and for a moment neither man spoke. Captain Rourke. Kor's voice, when it came, had none of the certainty it carried 6 hours earlier in a hallway that smelled of ozone and old iron. You have a fleet trapped and a system that can end us at will. Say what you want. I don't want anything from you, Marshal. Rourke stood at the viewport, compass back in his hand, thumb over the letters. You crossed a line 300 years of my species agreed never to let anyone cross. That's already happened. Nothing you say now undoes it. Then what was the demonstration for? It wasn't a demonstration. Rourke's voice didn't rise. You keep looking for the part where we wanted something. Territory, surrender, tribute. There isn't one. You have spent 6,800 years learning to take. We spent 300 years learning to hold. Those aren't the same skill, and you can't buy your way out of the second one with anything you learned from the first. Somewhere behind core, Vess said nothing at all, and for once his silence wasn't fear. It was recognition. On the Annihilator's lower deck, word of the channel reached the crew the way bad news always did, sideways, through people who weren't supposed to know yet. A weapons tech named Auric, young enough that this was his first campaign, stood at his station and watched 200 ships worth of tactical icons sit dead still on the display, and found himself doing something he'd never done in training. He counted them, one at a time. 3 vessels near the formation's ragged edge broke silence on a discipline channel Core wasn't monitoring, their captains arguing in low, fast bursts about whether the marshal's order to hold was an order at all anymore. One of them, a hard-edged commander named Ashet, who'd never lost a ship under her command in 30 years, gave the order to break formation and run for the outer marker at full burn, not toward the human ship, away from the whole dying system. Not because anyone asked him to, because it felt like the only thing left that was still his to do. Not every ship held, or just a man refusing to admit the fleet had stopped being his to command. Protocol and Marshal and Empire be damned. The Grey Reach didn't ask her intentions before it answered. Her ship folded the way the Vanguard had folded, fast and total, and the 2 captains who'd been arguing with her went quiet on the channel in a way that told Core everything about how much authority he had left before he'd even finished hearing the report. Casualties, he said, and didn't recognize his own voice. One more ship, Marshal. Vess's hands had gone steady again, the specific stillness of a man watching his own certainty finish dying. It wasn't following your order. It was trying to prove the order didn't matter anymore, did it? No. Vess looked at him. It proved the opposite. Nobody's broken formation since. Rourke reached past Solanke and set his hand flat on the console, beside the compass, beside Reyes's half-finished lattice reroute. The wall Reyes is building isn't a punishment, it's a fact. Nothing crosses the Grey Reach again, not your fleet. Not the next one. Not in your lifetime, or your empire's, however long that turns out to be now. You're condemning 2,000 ships to die in a box. No. Rourke's jaw tightened, the first crack of feeling he'd shown all day. I'm giving you a choice your species has never had to make before. Power down. Drift. Live inside the wall you tried to break, on whatever terms that allows, for as long as it takes someone to figure out how to open a door that was built to never open again. Core thought of the young cartographer humming over a map of a system she'd never see, of Ashet's 30 unbroken years ending on an order given out of nothing but panic. Or keep pushing, and find out how much further this system is willing to go to make sure you don't. Silence stretched across 90 light years of channel delay. Of the small carved token Tesk had carried in his coat pocket into a wreckage field where nobody would ever recover it. He thought of Relian's voice in the alcove Pattern's End and understood, with the same total clarity that had carried him through 190 years of unbroken victory, that the math had simply stopped being his to run. Power down, he said. The words came out flat, stripped of every certainty he'd built a career on. All ships, full stop. Pass the order myself. Ship by ship, across 3 minutes, that felt considerably longer to everyone watching. The Drakvani formation went dark, running lights cutting first, then weapon systems, then, last of all and most reluctantly, I won't have another Ashet. Rise's hands moved fast over the console, sealing the lattice one section at a time, and Rourke watched the tactical display settle not into silence, but into something steadier, a held shape instead of a closing one. It didn't happen all at once. The engines that had carried some of those vessels through 47 conquests. Auric, on the lower deck of the Annihilator, watched his own console icon join the rest and felt something in his chest unclench that he hadn't known was clenched. 2,000 ships drifting. Held, not destroyed. A wall 300 years in the making, finally finished doing the only job it had ever been built for. Rourke picked the compass up off the console. Sir, Solanke hadn't moved from her station, but her voice had lost the last of its rehearsed calm. For what it's worth, my grandmother used to say the whole platform survey only made sense if somebody eventually tried us. She never said what happens after. I don't think she ever let herself imagine it working. It worked because we never needed it to, Rourke said. Today's the first day it wasn't nothing. Reyes sat back from her console at last, hands shaking now that there was nothing left to steady them for, and said nothing. 300 years of nothing happening was the whole point, because there was nothing left that needed saying that Rourke hadn't already told her with the compass on the console an hour before. 90 light-years away, Elder Relian watched the same feed settle into stillness, and for the first time in 40 years, he didn't say anything to the empty room at all. He simply reached out and turned the star chart off, the way a man closes a book he already knows the ending to. The recording reached him 3 days later, formal, official, stripped of everything except the words Rourke had actually said. Relian played it once alone in quarters that hadn't changed their furniture in longer than anyone kept records for. He listened to Kor's voice ask what the human wanted, and Rourke's answer, and let it play all the way to the silence at the end before he spoke. They thought we were primitives, he said quietly, to no one, because there was no one left in that hall who still argued with him. They did not understand that primitives are the ones who survive. He let the silence sit a while before he added the rest. The part the recording hadn't said out loud but that he'd understood the moment the wall closed. They were never a conquering species. They were a stopping species. They did not want our worlds. They wanted us to stop taking them. No declaration followed it. No decree, no new law entered into the Dominion's endless catalog of conquered things. Just an old man, in a room nobody visited anymore, finally right about something he'd rather have been wrong about for another 40 years. Nobody in the Dominion revised the occupation charter for Sol. Nobody needed to. The cartographer who'd sketched its borders humming to herself 6 hours and 1 lifetime ago filed the drawing in an archive nobody would open again, under a system renamed that stuck for exactly as long as the wall held, forbidden. Aboard the Vanguard, Solanke finally exhaled the calm she'd rehearsed all day into something that sounded almost like a laugh, almost like tears, and didn't try to sort out which. Reyes stayed at her station a while longer than she needed to, watching the driftfield settle into something that no longer required watching. Rourke didn't say anything about the math, or the line, or what it had cost 300 years of people he'd never meet to make sure this day went the way it went. He walked to the viewport instead, past the wreckage field, past the drifting, powered-down wall of a fleet that would sit there now for longer than anyone currently breathing would live to see resolved. He pressed the compass to the display glass, the etched words facing outward, toward the fleet on the other side of a line that would hold long after every person on this bridge was gone. Home 4.2 laugh. Behind him, the bridge lights dimmed to standard cycle, the way they did every evening, whether an empire had crossed a line that day or hadn't. Rourke folded his hand back around the compass and said nothing else at all.